take our breaths away with its glow.
Whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. I'm Alicia Thompson Corley. If that quote from Philippians resonated with you, stay tuned. I'd love to introduce you to intriguing, creative people whose light is making our world a lovelier place. Welcome to Finding Beauty.
Alicia Thompson is an educator who's based in Atlanta, Georgia, and she has extensive training in both performance and in pedagogy of piano. She began her training in Edmonton. At 15, she got an associate diploma in piano performance from the Western Board of Music, which is now Conservatory Canada. She got a BA in sociology at York University, studied with Boris Zarankin, who was at the Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto. And then she went to City University and got a bachelor's degree in music education with a choral emphasis, and then with a minor in education. I almost left that out. And then she continued her studies in Atlanta, where she still lives, and received an MA in piano pedagogy from Georgia State University. She teaches privately. She's been the staff accompanist at Clark Atlanta, has taught group piano at Morehouse in Georgia State, and she continues to serve as an accompanist, and she maintains a private piano studio, and she is a piano teacher at the Omni International School. So quite a career in education. But I know a few things about Alicia, because Thompson and Thompson Corley, that's not a coincidence. For example, how it was that you decided you wanted to learn the piano. Would you like to tell that story, or would you like me to tell that story?
Well, you could tell it.
Okay. And this is from my mom, because I don't remember. But the story is that she wanted to learn how to play What Do You Get When You Fall in Love, that song that was made popular by Dionne Warwick, written by Hal David and Burt Bacharach. And then once she learned how to play that, she decided she didn't want to play anything else. But my mother had other ideas, and so here she is. So, Alicia, you started off with a degree in sociology, and that wasn't your first choice. You started off with fashion merchandising, and then you went to sociology. But you ended up coming back to music. Can you tell us what it was about music that drew you away from those other maybe more practical things?
Well, I guess because I just had such a deep love for music, and when I was about maybe 9, I wrote a music book with creative titles like Hot Dog Candy, which I wrote songs. And it was like a teaching book, like the old John Thompson's, with some pieces that I wrote for kids from which to learn. And so it's always something that I did and loved to do. But to be honest, part of the reason that I left the whole idea of music was because I felt oftentimes like I was sandwiched in between. I was Maria's sister or I was Patty's older sister. And I wasn't Alicia. I wasn't, and so I felt like I wanted to do something completely just what nobody else was doing so that I could, forge my own way. But I really, loved music and I was very good at it. And so I just, I came back to it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I never thought of, Patty obviously did music and we all got very advanced and we all did multiple instruments, but I guess I wasn't totally shocked that my youngest sister, Patricia, did not end up being a musician. I suppose any one of us and all of us earned money teaching and playing, and she played for ballet schools and continued to teach when she was in college. But I'm surprised that you said that you felt like you were her older sister, because I don't know, I just didn't think of her as being, I guess, as serious about becoming a musician. But I guess it's maybe the middle child syndrome or something. I suppose I'm a middle child in a sense, but not in that sense, I guess, since I was the oldest one who was doing music. But
oldest girl, too.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that, as far as being really serious about music itself, we all played to some extent, but as far as being competitive and doing, trying to when...
Well, I guess it's something that my father unintentionally said, and I adore my father. I'm definitely, I think we are all to some degree daddy's girls to a certain degree, but, I, of course, loved and adored my father and miss him terribly. But when we went to Ohio, my uncle said to both of us, which one of you is better? There's one of you that's better. It's Maria, right? Or something to that nature. And I never forgot that. Because I was like, because he says, yeah, your father was saying, and first of all, it was very, Uncle Lance should have used more discretion. But I never forgot that. And it made me feel like, wow, it wasn't a good feeling. And so I always felt like I should do something, different, because I felt, it's something that always bothered me. So
why sociology?
Just because, I was either that or social work. I'd been through so many majors. That was the problem before I actually ended up in music. I mean, it wasn't just fashion merchandising, and before that, before sociology. Eventually, I had been in Latin American and Caribbean studies, a minor in French. And fashion merchandising was really just a blip. It was just sort of like,
that was
it wasn't serious. But because I was so young, remember, I was 16, and for some that would have been okay to go to college. For me, I was just so indecisive, and so it was not I didn't know what I wanted to do.
I guess part of the journey. I suppose some people finish high school at the regular age and don't have any idea what they're planning to do, and I know I meet them now. I suppose maybe it's more okay these days to not quite know what you're going to do at when you finish. It used to be, I guess, a lot more pressure to be more focused, or I guess people took gap years and whatever back in the day too, or but anyway, well, yeah, if it makes you feel any better, which it may not. I recall hearing our parents talking about how I felt like I had arrived, and I think I don't know how old I was at that point, but I was quite young, and I remember that was just like a huge blow to hear your parents say, wow, she thinks she's all that. And after that, I have to admit I've had a constant struggle to feel like, if I play well, is it, do I deserve to play well? Did I work hard enough to play well? And, just a general self-doubt. Now, I admit to having some youthful arrogance about things, because it did come very easily. But anyway, so as I said to Kiana, my daughter, I know I gave you something to tell a therapist. Hopefully it wasn't a lot, but I think at some point,
well, I've given Justin quite a few things, I'm sure.
Okay. Well, at some point, all parents, I think, and that was, to me, what was daunting about becoming a parent, was the idea that that at some point you're going to do something, and it's not going to be intentional, and you're going to screw up your kid in some way or the other. So I said, I hope I gave you just enough, or, your growing up gave you just enough to make you expressive. You can work out the rest. Anyway. So you...
Yeah, sociology was, I always had a concern for the well-being of other people, and so, it was something which, and I've struggled sometimes with that too, because I feel sometimes, should I go get another degree in sociology or do family law or something like that as well? It's always been an off and on struggle. But then with my kids, ultimately going back to music, and they're not my children, of course, but my students.
Say your kids.
My students, who I often refer to as my kids. A lot of times in order for them to be able to become really good musicians, you have to get to know them in a way which is very different than like a teacher in school, because they have to, being able to express and tap into parts of themselves which they might not normally have done. You have to have it, I think, to be a good teacher, a deep concern for people. I think that makes a huge difference.
Well, I think ideally, if you're going to see these people every week, hopefully you don't remain indifferent. But I understand what you're saying. I think there's an aspect of psychology that is involved in being a good teacher. I certainly agree with that. So the next question I was going to ask you was, you are a very expressive pianist. Do you feel that musicality can be taught?
I think that you can teach certain aspects of it. I have some students that it really often doesn't matter how much I do. They're just not going to, they're going to be robotic. But I do have students where they can't, it's just like, here's a crescendo, I'm going to do that. Here's this, I'm going to do that. And they're not thinking of the phrasing. It doesn't matter how much you tell them about phrasing or how much you demonstrate or how long they've played. Sometimes they just don't have a natural sense for it. And then there are those that I have that are extremely musical, and I have very little that I have to tell them, because if I convey something, they can convey it back. So I do believe that some of that has to be innate. So my son Justin, for example, he is not he doesn't practice anywhere close to as much as I want him to, or based on our time and our schedule, but he will, if I tell him certain things musically, he just instinctively can do it. And of course he's learning more and more. He's only 11, but he can instinctively just, do phrasing, which I haven't really taught him. It's just through a lot of listening and then just having a natural sense. Now, some people don't have that natural sense. I can teach them and they will be able to execute it. And then there are those who don't have the natural sense. I can teach it and they'll just never get it. Honestly, whenever
I guess if you are a very, very sensitive person, then you'll pick up on the things that are around you. To me, if you have young children and they are very musical, to me I always think, okay, well, obviously they've experienced more emotions, and sometimes that's, sort of like, okay, I wonder what the story is there. I've told students when I'm trying to explain things and said, okay, your childhood has been too happy. They don't have the depth, and it's not necessarily a bad thing when you're young that you don't have that depth. But yeah, I agree. Obviously, there's some people whose hearts are more open, and I think if you don't have those things to draw on, it's like having a box of crayons and one person has 5 crayons and the other one has 22. Well, you can't expect the one with 5 crayons to create things with as much different shadings, and perhaps that's similar. But I was going to say, speaking of Justin, who plays piano and trumpet both beautifully, and he plays classical and jazz. So how important is it to you as a teacher and as a mother, just to expose kids to more than just classical music?
It's very important to me. I mean, I would say I'm pretty much, it would be jazz and classical, and the other stuff they can pick up on their own, or if they are desperate to do, for example, like someone similar to Taylor Swift or that type of music, I'm going to allow them to do it, but it's not going to be anything we're going to spend a lot of time studying, because it's a different sort of avenue and requires it requires so much from me. Yeah. I feel, for me, the two highest Western art forms are the classical and jazz, and I want children to have an appreciation of both. And I wanted Justin to, in particular, as I do with my other students as well, that I have them all do like some of the classic jazz pieces, because I want their ears also to be trained to hear things beyond just traditional classical, and also just to have the appreciation so that where they can look and see the high art of John Coltrane, as well as the high art of Beethoven or Albéniz or Debussy. To me they're all high art. So, and for him being so young, I want him to have an ear, for that, and I don't want to sound elitist, but for me, I've never been a fan of hip hop and stuff like that. Not that there's anything wrong with it, at all, but for me, it just never did anything for me, at all. And not even when I was younger. It really just never did anything for me.
Does he like those kinds of music? I mean, or would he admit that?
He does. I saw him YouTubing some, he likes it to a certain degree, but he's not going to seek it out in front of me, but he does like it.
If he admit it.
Yeah, no. He just because I caught him he did some song, and I can't remember what it was. I couldn't even understand what they were saying, but but he was like doing the actions and stuff. And so once I got past my horror, I was like, oh, okay, well, obviously he's going to be around a lot of that. But the thing about it is like, for example, I played for him the other day, giving a new piece he wants to do. I played a couple of pieces, but The Little Shepherd was one of them. And he listened to it, and he said, I really like that. He said, I want to learn that. And so that's his, one of his new pieces. So I'm not overly concerned that he's gonna, like, I want him to enjoy whatever he's listening to, but I also want him to understand and try to appreciate the complexity of how complex and actually how simple music can be as well. And I mean, it's interesting because
Kiana's kind of the opposite in that, and Malcolm just kind of, does his own thing. And, my eldest daughter is studying music, and my son, who is on the autism spectrum, is not as influenced by peer things, or at least I've not seen evidence of it. I mean, he seems to like whatever he likes, and it could be like if he's tuning the radio dial, he could stop on the hard rock, or he could stop on anything that's just grabs his fancy. And I remember on, for example, on Easter Sunday, I put on Messiah, Handel's Messiah, and he stayed in the room for the whole thing, which I was quite shocked. He loves El Giro, but he also likes Taylor Swift.
Oh, that's one of my,
That's wide, really wide. And I don't have a knee-jerk, like, I hate people because they're popular thing. I mean, again, Taylor Swift, she has some catchy songs. In general, she doesn't do that much for me, so I'm not trying to push that on him. But Kiana was, I think, reacting as trying to define herself as someone different than me. And then, she said at first she hated classical music, and the only reason that she would like it was to go to sleep, because it was kind of stuff that put you to sleep. So, and she, but she heard it all the time, obviously, if I'm rehearsing and practicing and stuff. And so as she's gotten older, then and majored in music and has become familiar with more different things, she will come to my concerts voluntarily and say that she enjoys certain things. Now, I'm not as hardcore as you are. I think that all kinds of music, it's just different languages to me, conveying emotion. And there are classical pieces I find very boring, and there's jazz that I'm like, okay, this is just going on and on and on. I mean, not like John Coltrane, but I really feel like there's something really difficult about writing a song that has a lot of depth. For example, someone like Stevie Wonder, or I'm a big fan of Prince.
Well, I'm a huge R&B fan. Let me clarify that.
Okay.
I'm a huge, I saw a Stevie Wonder concert, and I literally went home to find out where I could fly to hear it again. I am a huge R&B fan, but I don't.
Big hip hop's not your thing. Everybody has something that isn't their thing, and that's cool. Okay, so moving on to something else. Yeah. A big chunk of your life has been spent training to be a musician, and a big chunk has been spent trying to inspire young people to love the piano enough to play it well. And these days, as you know, arts budgets are often the first ones cut. Can you talk a little bit about why you think the arts are still important?
Well, Omni International, where I teach piano, but I'm also the general music teacher as well. So I'm there and I teach from K to 6. And one of the first things I've done over the years is ask the students, and I realize now that I'm saying that I didn't do that this year, and I need to do it with them. But I asked the children from K to 6 to write why music is important to them and what the world would be like without music. And of course, there's some kids who are like, I don't care whether we have music or not, but the majority of them, like one little girl, I remember saying to me, she says she doesn't know that she'd be able to live if there was not music. And I told her, I said, you would, to try to,
you would be able to live.
Yeah, you would be able to live. But she said, it's because it was a little dramatic, but she was saying that it was just that important to her. Now, she doesn't actually play an instrument or anything. She just is someone who just loves to listen to many different types of things. She's a dancer.
Oh, yeah.
But many of them I had to try to make them think about how music affects every part of your life. Like I, have my guilty pleasure of watching Days of Our Lives whenever I can. It's not intellectual.
I'm never guilty.
Stuff. No, I don't mean it.
You should not be guilty.
No, but I don't. But it's I do listen occasionally, like watching the be level television, like, you know, I just do sometimes because sometimes I don't want to have to think too hard.
Yeah.
And so I know a lot of it's not nonsense, or a lot of it is nonsense, I should say. But I was imagining, like, with some of these, they have these dramatic scenes where with the relatively poor acting, and if the music wasn't there, you know, the music is half of what makes it. And that's like in any movie or anything like that. If the music wasn't there, what would these things be? They would be, it creates a huge effect. You know, and I think that for some people, like I look at, think again of Justin is so blessed to have so many things that he's able to do, you know, well. But there are children and people that, you know, maybe they're not academically gifted just because, you know, the way the schools are taught, you know, it may not work with their learning style, but they are incredibly artistic, whether that be, you know, with the traditional sort of drawing and painting, or as a musician or dancer or something of that nature. And what would they do, you know, if they weren't able to nurture that? For some people, they don't have the means to be able to afford to do that on their own. You know, it's you know, from their parents, you know, they need the schools to help nurture beyond just STEM. I know they have STEAM now, you know, because they recognize that STEM is not enough.
I've heard things where they talk about how students who drop out of school, they would drop out of school rather if they didn't have these other outlets. And, I mean, for some kids there's sports, you know, and that helps give them some sort of focus and working together as a team. But for kids who don't have that particular talent or desire, then, I mean, it's more than just, are these people going to be very good? It's a way to express the things that maybe you can't express other ways, or help you process your feelings. So I certainly agree. Okay, now the two questions that I've been asking everybody, and I do have another question I'd like to ask if we can get to it, but and one of them is, I think you've kind of addressed it, like how do you define beauty and how important do you think beauty is in this world? For example, the way I'm thinking of it is that art can reflect the ugliness, or you can call it the reality. And brief tangent about hip-hop, which was, you know, people have talked about the lyrics and how, you know, lyrics are very negative and whatever. And I think it's become something where people perhaps are just playing a part and saying, okay, well, people like it when we talk about something or the other, whether it's pretending to be a gangster, so to speak, like Vanilla Ice, someone, you know, playing a part, or Iggy Azalea. But if you have somebody who, this is their experience and this is what they're thinking, and they are expressing something, you know, in music or in verse that is part of their life, and they're just telling you their story, whether you like it or not, whether you think it's pretty or not. But then there's another point of view that, how do you feel about the idea of trying to create beauty or reflect reality, or do you think that both things can happen at once? That was a really long question.
I mean, I do think that both things can happen at once. And I do want to just, I guess, clarify with my whole issue with hip-hop is that I just like to hear people sing. I don't want to hear you talking for 20 minutes.
It's
you know,
fair.
and that's what my issue is, you know, as far as the type of lyrics that are being used, and a lot of times I don't like them, but I mean, but when they're, you know, as important, I just like to hear the sung word, I guess, is more
I
thing.
understand.
I understand. But I think you can do both. I guess I listened to something that's really beautiful. It can also be, and I say in quotes, dark as well, because, for example, you mentioned Stevie Wonder, and these two pieces to me have always been so similar, even though they're completely different genres. But the Chopin Prelude Opus 28, number 4, I believe that's the
E minor one.
E minor one.
Yeah, with
the one
with the chromatic.
movement.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so that one is, you know, that is the first time I played it, Justin was so excited to hear it. You know, of course, he first played it and performed it so many different ways, you know, and, you know, and he got more mature as he was doing it. He still, I'm sure, will do it again, you know, years from now, play it quite differently. But it's, it is such a sad piece, but it's so beautiful. And then you think of Stevie Wonder's All Is Fair in Love. To me,
I knew you were going to say that song.
Exactly. No, but they're almost exactly the same. They're exactly the same. That same sort of motion, and then in that I should have never left your side, just like that whole thing in Chopin, and then it kind of has a denouement afterwards, and they're so similar.
I had never thought of that, but yeah, I mean, I knew you were going to say that song just because, when you led with the one, that was the Stevie Wonder song that I would think that would go with it, but yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, but yeah, actually that makes perfect sense. Okay, so I want to do these two other questions. One of them is classical music in particular is very niche and more of a niche thing. And if you look at the Grammys, there was a time when they at least gave classical music a little bit of something. And if you look at even jazz, also they don't really do anything that's straight ahead jazz. And I remember the last thing with Ed Sheeran, who I think is a very good songwriter and a very gifted musician. But he did the song, Thinking Out Loud, and you had Herbie Hancock playing like some little bit of something that you couldn't even hear what he was doing and not displaying any particular skill. Like anybody could have played that pretty much. And then who had any piano skills? And then you had, John Mayer played the guitar and he did some improvisation, but like he's not a jazz player. Or maybe he could play jazz. But anyway, the framing of it. And they had Liang Lang playing some weird cadenza in the middle of something, which was, I think it was Pharrell singing Happy, and he just did some weird thing that had nothing to do with anything. Anyway, so do you think that those things can be relevant?
Like what I'll get some students that are interested in, a lot of them want to play video games, and some of them like that video game music, and a lot of the music actually from, I'll say, well, if you download it, we can learn it. A lot of it is like new agey kind of music, which is actually quite pretty, like with some of these Japanese games. I do get requests for some of those, and most of the students that I have, and I have a real mix of students. I think probably my African American students probably comprise about 30%. I have never had pushback.
I gave a talk at a community center called Classical Music for Urban Kids, and the point was that it's a language, as I think I mentioned already, and so the emotions are the same, and so I connected whatever it was, whether I played Traumerai, which I wasn't sure was a good idea because it was really hot. I thought people might actually fall asleep. But when I walked in, this kid asked me, "Are you going to rap?" And I said, "No, I don't know how to rap, but I'm going to play the piano." After it was over, a couple people came up and very quietly said, do you know the Prelude is not my favorite piece of Beethoven, but whatever.
Oh, it's dreadful.
Really, but it's the one that everybody knows. I don't know if it was
that's the thing.
But people really like it, and they're saying, "Well, do you know that one?" And someone said, "Oh, do you know the Moonlight Sonata? I like the Moonlight Sonata." But they came up, and it was almost like they just wanted to pull me aside and not say it too loudly. And what I was telling them was to put yourself in a box and say that you have to like certain things and have to dislike certain things. The people who you think you're impressing with that, most of them are not going to be part of your life or an integral part of your life for as long as you think. And, these were kids who were in school, so, it's the whole thing of seeming cool or uncool. All that pressure that kids have. But anyway, I think if you present things with passion, I think that people will pick up on that passion. And I'm not, as you can tell, promoting, that saying anybody has to like any one thing, but I think that to reject something without even giving it a chance and trying to experience it means that you're trying to make yourself a smaller person, and I'm not sure that's a good thing. So, okay, last question. Do you think that art can change the world?
I think so. I think that, for example, with what you were just saying, where, they're children, so they're quietly coming up to you and saying, asking you to play something else, another piece. But I think that it can change it in a positive way, and it can change it in a negative way as well, depending on who is presenting the art and how it's being presented.
Yeah.
But I think without art, of any kind, that it can be very, very, very powerful. And without it, I can't imagine, of course, because it's a big part of my life, but I just can't imagine, not using that level of creativity to find some level of peace, Yeah, so it's powerful, and generally I think is generally used positively, but it can be used negatively as well. But it's definitely powerful.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for fitting this in. I know it was a challenge. I really, really appreciate you talking to me. I'm Maria Thompson Corley, and this is Finding Beauty.
The theme music for Finding Beauty is Symphony of Light, written and performed by Kiana Corley, with assistance on the cello from Allegra Banks. Rusty Banks was the producer. Right now, you're listening to Liszt's Petrarch Sonnet No. 104, performed by yours truly. You can hear the rest of it on my CD, Music from the Novel Letting Go, available on CreateSpace and Amazon. If you're interested, you can check me out at mariacorley.com or mariasworld.us. You can also find me on Twitter, at Maria Corley, or YouTube. My recordings are available through Albany or Amazon. My novel, Letting Go, is available on Smashwords, CreateSpace, Barnes & Noble, and Amazon. Or drop me a line on my site, and I'll send you a signed copy. I want to leave you with one more quote. Do your little bit of good where you are. It's the little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world. Desmond Tutu. Have a beautiful day.